Why do paramedics quit? You know, there's a million different reasons, just like why you would quit any other job. I know some people who quit being a paramedic because of specific incidents that happened to them on the job. You know, want to actually make more than minimum wage for risking your life. Specifically, volunteers. A lot of volunteers quit because they can't do it anymore. You know, they have a full-time job plus they volunteer. They just can't volunteer anymore. That's why most of your fire departments, EMS departments, there really are very few volunteer departments left because people just can't afford to do that. They can't, you know, they have to spend more of their time working. They can't afford to be a volunteer fireman or volunteer EMT or volunteer paramedic or whatever. Around here, I know Kingston 40 Fort has a bunch of volunteer firemen and EMTs. Places like Back Mountain and stuff like that. A lot of smaller towns have volunteer, but I mean, once you get to a certain population and population density, it's just going to be taxpayer paid. You know, and that's the big thing that's happening in my town is all the volunteer places and the sort of private places, they can't afford to keep it going, and they keep sending out these messages that are like, please donate generously if you can, because if you can't, what's going to happen is it's going to be replaced by, you know, professional system, no volunteers, government run, and your taxes are going to go up huge. That's what's going on here anyway. But anyway, what are your current C-spine protocols, and do you think they need to be changed? The C-spine protocols, for me, when I was taught, things are sort of rebounding where, you know, it used to be everybody gets a backboard, everyone gets a C-collar, everyone gets everything. It was like fucking Oprah. You know, you get a backboard, you get a backboard, you get a backboard. And now it's completely swung the other way where, you know, that's not appropriate for everyone. Now they teach you, like, you have to use your brain and actually figure out who needs to be boarded with a short board, a long board, you know, a KED, whatever, who needs a C-collar. Because it's not natural, you know, to the curvature of the spine to strap someone to a longboard. And, you know, if you need to do it, you need to do it. And if there's a risk of spinal injury and of neck injury, you need to do it. But you have to use your brain and actually figure out, does this person need to be boarded? Does this person need a C-collar? The big way we figured out if they needed a C-collar, the big way we were taught was you palpate the cervical spine. And, you know, because you have to vocalize everything as you're doing it and taking the test and everything, it's like, okay, I'm palpating the face and I'm feeling for anything out of the ordinary. I'm checking for crepitus I'm looking at the patient's face to see if their facial expression changes. You know, I'm going to palpate your jaw now. You know, let me know if anything feels weird or if you have pain or anything like that. And you'd palpate down the shoulders and down the arms and everything. And then I'd say, you know, you would say, now I'm palpating the neck and the cervical spine. You know, does this hurt? Does anything feel weird when I touch you? Can you feel me touching you back here? You know, I don't feel any crepitus. I don't feel anything broken. I don't feel any blood. I don't feel any cerebrospinal fluid, blah, blah. If I said, you know, does this hurt? If they said no, I would actually say out loud, okay, then I know they don't need a C-collar. That was essentially the protocol. Palpate the cervical spine, and if you don't feel anything weird, if the patient doesn't say ow, if their, you know, eyes don't twitch like they felt pain but they're not saying it, they don't need it. If you don't need one, you don't need one. You know, you have to actually be a medic and figure out, do you need one or do you not, instead of just giving everyone one, you know, because they were in a car accident, you know, oh, well, you get a spine board. Now you have to actually think about it, and I think that's a good way to do it, and it saves a lot of potential complications later on. I think C-spine protocols now, at least in my area, it might be different in different states, but I like them. I support them. I don't think they need to be changed. How hard is EMT training? It's a bit of a difficult question to answer because it depends on what kind of student you are. It's going to go by so fast, and at the end, you're going to feel like, I can't believe we're taking the test now. You know, I can't believe I'm taking my NREMT. It feels like just yesterday, they were teaching us the very, you know, because there's that grace period in the beginning with anything where mistakes are, you know, tolerated because you're new and you kind of fumble through stuff. And then you do it more and more. But I mean, I was so nervous about the NREMT that when I did my NREMT psychomotor, I mean, I was still sort of, you get in that student's mindset, and it's just like, oh my god, I have to actually do it now. Like, even though you've done it a million times, I mean, that's all we did for such a long time. Especially towards the end, we just did station, 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 station. But still, while I was doing it, I was like, oh my god, I felt like I knew absolutely nothing. Like, what am I doing here? I don't know shit. The tests are difficult. You know, it's not just a matter of like, oh, I'm a people person and I kind of like medicine, I'll do well. I mean, it is a course. You know, it is a class. And you have to be, there's an academic side more so than just knowing what to do. I mean, of course, you're studying this stuff so that if you're presented with a patient who has this, you know what to do. But remember, you're in a class, you're also going to be taking a quiz and a test on this stuff. So if you're not good at that side of it, it's going to be very difficult for you and you might not pass. I mean, the tests were very difficult. They're long. For us, and I think just in general now, they're on computer, they're multiple choice, you know, where like A is dead wrong, B is right, C is right, D is right, but D is the best one, and you have to choose D or else it's getting marked wrong, even though B and C are correct. I mean, they're not incorrect, but it's not the best one, and that's how the NR EMT is set up. That's how all of your tests will be set up. And you know, there are quizzes, there are pop quizzes. If you're not good at the academic side, it's going to be difficult. And there's a lot of studying. I mean, there is a lot of studying. You know, in medicine, nothing beats real experience. With dealing with actual patients and with actual emergencies, the more you do the practical labs, the more you do your clinicals, the more you deal with real people and real patients, you start to notice patterns, you start to get a feel for, you know, when a person's going south, when a person has this, blah, blah, blah. That will come. But the academic side of it, because again, like I said, remember, it is still a class. So the academic side of it is like A, B, true, false. Like that still is going to happen and you have to have a handle on that. And that's going to require a lot of studying. Once you experience it, it kind of clicks and it's like, okay, shit, you develop an intuition for real people, but the academic side wants numbers and a list of symptoms. So you have to sort of do both, you know what I mean? But how hard is EMT training? I mean, like I said, it's a difficult question to answer, but it's going to be intense. And don't get me wrong, with me, I mean, my instructors were very, very accommodating. And I mean, if I had said, hey, I have an issue with this, they would have said, I'll come in early and help you with it. I'll stay late and help you with it. But at the same time, there's just way too much information, especially when you get to the academic things like, you know, vocabulary, medical terminology. There's just too much there to hold your hand, you know what I mean? But, you know, it's pretty rough. You know, becoming an EMT is a difficult thing. The standards are very high, as they should be. You're anxious, you're nervous, and when you start clinicals, oh my God, my first clinical, I thought, what the hell am I doing here? Like, this is so real. Because, you know, when we're doing it in class, we're friends, we're classmates, we're joking around with each other, you know, we're having fun. Man, when there was a broken human being in front of me, I was like, oh my God, what the fuck? What am I doing here? I almost quit. I seriously almost quit. Because I thought, oh my God, this shit is real. You know, you can do it. You know, let me cheerlead. You can do it. It's not impossible. I did it. But you brace yourself. If someone calls an ambulance for a mental health patient and the patient runs, would the EMTs have to chase them? In general, if anyone runs from an ambulance, would the EMTs have to let them go? Hell no. EMTs and paramedics care for the sick and injured. They do not apprehend. I am not a cop. That is a job for the police. If I'm dispatched to your son's off his meds and he's crazy and running around, I'm not even going in there until the cops secure the scene. And I mean, to be honest, in that situation, they'd probably dispatch PD first, and then the PD would alert us, and they'd dispatch an ambulance, and we'd go there. If you want to run, you can go ahead and run. I am not going to chase you. Have you seen most EMTs and paramedics? Most of them would fucking die if they had to chase one. They're like 350 pounds. My man here in the blue uniform with the gun on his belt, he's gonna tackle you. EMTs don't chase and tackle and restrain people. That's a job for the police. How do surgeons, doctors, firefighters, detectives, paramedics, and police officers deal with the disgusting and horrible things they see when they're new? People who choose this sort of line of work are a little fucked up to begin with. Once you get to the point where you're doing it, usually you have some kind of coping mechanism. You know what I mean? Like by the time you graduate as a paramedic, you've done a lot of clinical time. So you've developed some kind of system. Something you do mentally, whether it's conscious or subconscious, you have some way that you compartmentalize what you're looking at and what you're hearing and what you're seeing, because it's not always just terrible injuries, blood and guts, and picking up parts of people. You see disturbing shit, and you hear disturbing shit, and you smell disturbing shit. You know what I mean? It's like 911 operators. You have to listen to someone beg for help while they're dying, and they don't get there. I mean, the sound of that never will leave you. Part of the job description for an application for a fireman I once saw said one of the requirements was, oh, you need your this, you need your that, you need your EMT. And one of the requirements was you need the ability to see and hear things you'll always wish you can forget, but know you never will. Like, that was straight up on the application, like the ad, like, hey, fireman wanted. That was one of the requirements, because it is true for, cops, firemen, medics, doctors, everything. Maybe not surgeons. Surgeons, that's kind of a different thing. But when you're new, a lot of seasoned EMTs and medics kind of delight in freaking out the new guy and showing them something really gross and trying to freak them out and everything and make them puke. I mean, I wouldn't do that. I'm also not, like, seasoned. But, I think that's kind of being a douchebag. That's the thing. When you're new, you're sort of developing your coping mechanism with the fucked up things you could see. And maybe you don't even need one. Maybe it just, water off a duck's balls. When you're new, that's when you're sort of figuring out. And I'll tell you right now, you want some dark fucking gallows humor, pitch black. You talk to a cop, a fireman, a paramedic, an EMT. Oh, God. That is how, humor is how a lot of rescue personnel deal with what they see. There are also counselor things set up where you can talk about what happened, sort of get together and discuss things like that. But the biggest thing that we use is humor. It takes a certain type of intellect to pragmatically go, like, detach yourself and just be able to say, yep, well, can't save them all. You know what I mean? Hey, fucked up shit happens. Life is pretty mean sometimes. And it's unfortunate. It doesn't mean it's okay. But, I mean, like one of my instructors said, if you're a working EMT or paramedic, you might have 800 patients die on you in a year. They can't all be your friends, because no human brain can handle 800 friends dying. You know what I mean? They can't all be your friends. Empathize, don't sympathize. It's that paradoxical thing where we have to form a connection with you. You have to trust us. We have to trust you. We're healthcare providers. You have. I mean, if you're going to be honest with anyone, you have to be honest with a doctor, with a healthcare provider, whatever. We have to establish that connection, but we also have to say, hey, if you die, I can't get too broken up about it. You know what I mean? It's a paradoxical thing. And that's why, like Gary, one of my instrucors, said, whenever someone says they want to be an EMS, I kind of look at them like, what the fuck is wrong with you? What is a typical day in the life of an EMT? Hours of mind-numbing boredom interspersed with moments of sheer panic and terror. What happens if a child dies in an ambulance en route to the hospital despite resuscitation attempts? Can the EMT or paramedic call time of death? If a child dies in the ambulance and can't be revived, that's very rare. Children and infants are very resilient. They bounce back. The protocol for CPR is even different when dealing with an infant or a small child as opposed to an adult or an adolescent. An infant or small child, if you saw them go into respiratory arrest and then cardiac arrest, you're supposed to do like a minute or two of CPR first before even calling help, because odds are they're going to get revived from CPR alone. Because, most children and infants, unless they have a pre-existing condition, the only reason they go into cardiac arrest is as a secondary to respiratory arrest. It's because they can't breathe. Giving them CPR, getting them on oxygen, I mean, usually 9 times out of 10. Again, unless they have some sort of pre-existing condition. Whereas with an adult with CPR, the protocol is you always call for help first. So it would be pretty rare. I mean, I can think of situations where a child was terminally ill and they died in an ambulance and they couldn't be revived. In that case, though, no. Paramedics and EMTs cannot call time of death. We have to keep going until we get to the hospital. Again, with the exception of a small list of maybe like 5 things like decapitation, incineration, evisceration, stuff like that. I mean, if I'm looking at your heart on the side of the road and your chest is open, I can't do anything for you. I'm sorry. You know, the best surgeons in the world can't do anything for you. So I can call time of death then. But it's a very narrow bit of circumstances. So no, I mean, once we start resuscitative measures, we have to keep going until we reach the hospital. Or we're just too exhausted to do it, which is possible. I mean, trust me, doing CPR is incredibly physical. That shit, oh my God. Never been so sore in my life than the day after we started EMS CPR training in EMT class. Holy shit. That is a whole body workout. I was like, did I get mauled in my sleep? What happened? Do EMT classes require high level math? No, not really. I mean, paramedic, you need to know a little bit more medical math because you have to calculate dosages and stuff like that. Even that isn't like, it's not high level math. You're not doing, you know, Boolean algebra and differential equations and shit like that. You know, you have to know your times tables, you know, as an EMT especially, because, you know, you're supposed to take a pulse for 60 seconds, but you don't always have that long. So you take it for 15 seconds, multiply by 4. I like to do it for 30 seconds, multiply by 2, because that's more accurate. Why is there reverse writing on an ambulance? The reason that ambulance is written in reverse on the hoods, that's specifically stated by law. An ambulance has to have that. The specifications for an ambulance design, by the way, is called the KKK. I think it stands for something, but the reason is if you're in a really low compact car that's really small, and there are a lot of them, if I pull it behind you in an ambulance, you probably won't be able to see the lights. All you'll see in your rearview mirror is the word ambulance on the hood of the gut box. You know, a lot of people ask this because it's like, oh, is that really necessary? It is actually. You know, they did a lot of research into it and a lot of studies and stuff, and there are a lot of cars that are, you know, so small, or their mirrors are so small, or they're so low that if an ambulance pulls up behind them with lights and siren, they can't see the lights. They can only see the hood, that little section of the hood, and so that's why it says ambulance in reverse, so that you can read it in the rearview mirror. What does rubbing the chest do to an unconscious person? That's part of what's called painful stimulus as the protocols for doing CPR or trying to rouse someone who appears unconscious or asleep or what have you. You know, you start out by just doing stimulus, which is, you know, you just tap them on the shoulder like, hey, bud, are you okay? You know, that sort of thing. If that doesn't work, you go to painful stimulus. There are a couple different ways to do it, but the one you're referring to is called a sternal rub. You take your knuckles, you bury them into the sternum, the breastbone, in the middle of the chest, and you rub that motherfucker. And I'm going to tell you right now, that hurts like a bitch. You know, the idea being you'll hurt them so much that they'll sort of like, you know, they'll react a little bit and show you that they're still alive, that they're conscious, blah, blah, blah. There are other ways to do it. You can pinch the trapezius muscle. That hurts like a mother. And for infants, you flick the bottoms of their feet. But yeah, sternal rub is, I mean, you know, we have to have it done to us. We had a sternal rub, you know, a trap pinch, whatever you want to call it. When you pinch the trapezius against the collarbone, whoo, man, does that hurt. That hurts for weeks. You try to cause them pain. You can also pinch their nail beds, is the sternal rub that you're talking about. If you take your knuckles and bury them in the sternum and rub really hard, that really hurts. And if they're going to wake up, they're going to wake up after you do that.